Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport club personnel during the COVID-19 shutdown period. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan, and today I'm actually joined by my Stoned Heen View special co-host, and it's actually great to have him back, is Ben Carbonaro, and we've just finished the podcast for the summer series. We are now in autumn, the start of March. And Ben, thanks for your help during the summer series. You co-hosted a couple of episodes along with myself and, Jimmy Dalton in there, racing, and Liz Ellis, the Australian netballer and a media celebrity. So thanks for coming on board and hosting a couple of those episodes.
No worries at all, Mark. Pleasure to give your hand, mate.
And I'm going to let you do the honours. We have got a guest on this podcast for episode 47. And I've actually known this guy for 20 years almost, back at Channel 10. And I'll let you do the honours and introduce the guest.
I know him as well. It's usually a bit of a thumbs up because we're in separate boxes at the footy, but joining us today is Managing Director of Cozalive Media Communications, Films and Sports Commentator and Master of Ceremonies host, Ian Coza Cohen. G'day, Coza. How are you, mate?
Very good, boys. Nice to talk to you again, Mark. Nice to talk to you, Ben. And you're quite right. Yes, you blokes have known me a little while, and I've charted your path as well, and seen you ascend to where you are now, which is good to be chatting to you.
First of all, Coza, you're the media manager for the Peter Pub, a number of other events. How has COVID affected your media strategy for those events?
Yeah, well, obviously, when COVID hit, one of the events we were actually working on at the time was the Formula One Grand Prix, and that was the first major international event that was actually hit by COVID-19, and there was talk all the way up, and I was speaking with Andrew Westacott and the executive there about what was actually going to go on and whether the race was going to go on. The V8 drivers, of course, they wanted to race because they knew that they had a pristine circuit and everything ready to go. The crowds obviously were waiting to see what was going to happen, but in the end, the call was made, and that was the first global event that was really impacted by COVID, and there wasn't a Formula One Grand Prix in Melbourne last year. There subsequently wasn't a MotoGP either, and that was, I think, one of the early indicators, boys, that the event space was going to be hit pretty hard, and that's what happened. You talked about the Peter Pub, Ben. Obviously, that was virtual across 2020, and now looking into 2021, obviously, it was a virtual event rather, and a lot of other events went virtual. We're involved with Run for the Kids, which is a part of the Royal Children's Hospital Good Friday appeal. Got a number of cycling events that we were involved with as well, and unfortunately it was just a no-go zone. So the event space hit a lot of people pretty hard.
Hey Coza, Ian, like some of your strategies, and particularly off the website, we've seen things like social media policies, writing and sub-editing, developing key messaging or key messages, captivating media releases, the preemptive crisis management. And this is one thing that I want to touch on, is that if we talk about your business, and Ben sort of asked about, say, the strategy and how you've been affected through some of those events in the past year. Have you had to change your strategy around things like trying to get off the front page? Because that's something that a lot of people don't look at from a media perspective is, it's great to get branding and exposure, but there's the flip side of that, because you work with key people and key stakeholders. How do you go about changing the narrative as someone that can get the news out there around COVID and getting off the front page when there's a big story?
Yeah, you're quite right, Mark. Well, we do a number of things, and you've touched on a couple there. So obviously there's still people that utilise me as Ian Cohen sports journalist, and that ranges from AFL commentary, NRL commentary, obviously the Australian Open, all those things as well. So we do high-end corporate video production, and that's for a range of different organisations, the dairy industry, transport industry, construction industry, as well as sport. The part that you're touching on is the comms and strategy environment, where we do a lot of events, and I'm honoured to work with Neil Danaher on Fight MND and the Danaher Drive. And obviously in that comms and strategy space, that was where some of our clients actually went very quiet because they didn't have either the marketing budget or the resources to do things, whereas others actually ramped up what they wanted to do. They wanted to get out and tell their message. They wanted to say, we're still open for business. We're still doing things. And there's other clients that changed what they did. We've got a big multinational that we work with, employs 2,500 people around Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Indonesia. And their awards night, they couldn't do because normally they fly 200 people into Melbourne and they have a big awards night. So we flipped it on its head and we turned it into a virtual awards awards night, but we sent it out to all of their depots and bureaus and offices during the daytime. So instead of 200 people flying to Melbourne, all having a nice sherbet and a nice night and then flying back home with their awards, all of a sudden they had thousands of people getting engaged because of COVID. No one could fly anywhere. So we took it to them. People got sent the awards, managers would give it to them. We set up a whole virtual studio in their boardroom. There was 12 or 15 people on the project and it worked really well. So COVID has had a lot of things where the world has accelerated towards us. I did read where one of the authors had said that the year 2030 has now been brought forward to us in terms of the way we deal with business, what we do during COVID, the Zoom meetings we now have, the fact that, we're not as tactile, we're not having to be in the office. I think a lot of it will work around the fact that people will now get paid per project rather than per hour. So they'll say to you, Mark, right, I need this written, right? And they don't care whether you do it at 2:00 in the morning and play golf all the next day. They don't necessarily need you sitting in the office from 9 to 5. It'll become very project based. So we had to turn a little bit of our business around to obviously be able to accommodate our clients. There were some, as I said, that wanted to go quiet. There were others that actually really wanted to get their message out there. So we had to find ways to be able to do that through social media, through Zooms and Teams, Microsoft Teams, the sort of formats we're using right now. You guys have obviously done a similar thing as well. So there was a fair bit of rearrangement. And I get the feeling that sometimes it won't necessarily go back to what it was either.
Talk about social media, Coza. I mean, you probably come from a period also when you were a lot younger where social media and the media weren't as that engaged or it didn't even exist. How powerful do you feel that in this period of COVID is social media in getting information and getting news out there?
Yeah, that's really interesting. But the hard thing is, Ben, you got to make sure it's the right information because social media now allows everyone a platform.
Yep.
So literally any peanut can get on there and say, oh, by the way, this is, whereas you're quite right. When I started, the only way to really get news was through radio. And obviously you had news on the hour and you had talk radio. But then everyone used to race home and watch the 5 o'clock news, in my case at Channel 10, or the 6 o'clock news or the 7 o'clock news ABC. Because if you wanted to actually see vision of, let's say, Matthew Lloyd breaking his arm at training or something like that, you didn't just log on and have a look and go, oh yeah, heraldsun.com have got it. I'll have a look at that at 2:03 in the afternoon. You couldn't do that, right? So you get the radio report of, oh, Matthew Lloyd's broken his arm at training, no good. That'd be at 3 o'clock because it happened at 2:05. And then everyone would have to wait for the vision. And the first obviously was Channel 10 at 5 o'clock, then at 6 o'clock, 7 and 9, and then ABC and obviously SBS as well. So there was no cable TV. So there was no 24-hour news channel, right? Sports Tonight, a program that I loved and I'm sad of its demise, was something that everyone could watch on the way to bed, and you got your dose of NBL, V8 Supercars, AFL, NRL, rugby union, weird sports, American stuff, because there was no other way to get it. Whereas now you can log on and you can literally look down Twitter, and within 30 seconds of it happening, someone's got an opinion on it. Here's the vision. This is what it looks like. And you see it and it runs 17 seconds. You go, oh, okay, tick that box. Yeah, I've seen that. Move on. So the whole news landscape has changed a lot since when I started, and you had to have everything ready to go, and hit that mark of TV broadcast. Now it's much more fluid, 24 hours. Oh, you'll get the story in a moment, or, oh, look, if we tweeted that. The other thing is too, that as a journalist on the job now, no longer do you just do the interview, write your notes, work out where the edit is. You've then got to take a social picture of, here's me standing and here's Matthew Lloyd lying in the background, and here's a picture of him, and then you got to send that out on 18 different. So the actual journalist job is now more multi-layered as well. So they're busier quite often with less resources. So the whole news landscape's changed.
Hey, Coza, just a funny one. You're breaking my heart because I'm an Essendon supporter, and right in front of me, I'm looking at a Matthew Lloyd framed picture with there's 4 different shots of him. So he's kicking the ball, he's got his fist in the air, so you just read my mind, Coza. Amazing.
I didn't mean any harm on Lloydo. He's a lovely bloke, but I was just thinking of something that would have obviously lit up the news landscape, and that would have been it.
Ian, I want to talk a little bit about Coza Live Cozalive Media during COVID and personnel aspects to it, because, I've got to meet some of your staff, whether that's, previously Lucy and Alison, and believe it or not, I remember, being a Geelong boy going up to Melbourne on the train, and I think there was a cycling event on, and there was these people wearing this Cozalive stuff going back on the train to Melbourne. I think it would have been someone in your family. Your daughter might have been helping you out. But I guess the thing is, how's that changed your business with COVID and personnel? And have you had to do other jobs differently? Have you had to structure your day differently because because you may have not had the latitude of picking staff because you just haven't had the opportunity to do that because, you know, your finances would have been impacted because of COVID.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because the event's not on and we worked from project to project. So that obviously did have a financial impact, no doubt about that. But because the other sides of the business, the comms and strategy and video production and those sort of things continued, we were able to obviously move people around, not necessarily with their level of expertise in a particular thing, but you need to be pretty multi-talented if you're going to work within our business, because obviously we do go from one project to another and be able to do all those sort of things. So look, we were lucky, Mark, in the fact that we sailed a pretty straight ship. You know, we weren't overexposed with debt. And I think that's really going to impact a lot of businesses when JobKeeper stops. I think a lot of businesses that maybe haven't been able to restructure or change shape or head into that new horizon in a different way, they're really going to be hit hard. So you get the feeling that there's almost like some zombie businesses out there at the moment that are going to be hit hard. We've been lucky in that we've sailed a reasonably straight course. And for us, that's been okay. And as I said, because we haven't run with heaps of debt exposure, we haven't had lots of different 14,000 offices all around the place or anything else like that. It's all been pretty concise. And I think that's the way I set up the business. No one ever sets up a business thinking you're going to have a pandemic, but we set it up to be pretty lean and pretty dynamic anyway, with people who are good at a number of things. You know, there's no fat in the organisation, apart from me, but there's no fat in the organisation in terms of, you know, we haven't got people just sitting around all day. Everyone's got a job. Everyone knows what they need to do. And I think that's really important too. So look, we've been lucky, touch wood, that the people who are involved in our projects have still been involved in our projects. But yeah, look, there's other industries that have been hit really hard. And I get a lot of phone calls from a lot of camera guys or editors or producers or social media people. And these, hey, Coz, what's going on? You know, I've just been let go from here, or this has happened, or what have you got going, or whatever. So make no mistake about it, it's hit a lot of people really hard. I thank our lucky stars that we were in a good position to begin with, and we were able to navigate waters which still aren't over yet either. That's the other thing. They're still not over.
Just a quick one before Ben asks his next question. What's your network in terms of your contract stuff, and how many people would you employ on an annual basis?
Oh, so we have different people for different things. So someone that works at, say, the cycling event isn't necessarily going to be doing corporate video production. Someone who does comms and strategy doesn't necessarily work in the sports space. So we've got a number, but we've got a pool of people we use that is between about 15 and 25, depending as to what we need. So, you know, there's some guys that are straight up cameramen. There's other guys that are cameraman editors, you know, and so we assign them to different jobs and be able to do it. So we've got a fairly fluid workforce in the fact that we've got a number of people that can do a number of things, but we've also got project specific people as well. So that certainly helped us. And as I said, that's the way. In 2012, when I left Channel 10, I didn't necessarily want to be in a position where I was employing 200 people or anything else like that. I was much more determined to do, and it's a bit like, you know, Uber don't own any cars, Airbnb don't own any houses. You know, so sometimes the actual business model being lean, it works to your advantage.
Spoke about in some ways, Coza, the negative effects of COVID, but at the same time too, it's been a positive. Things like Zoom, for example, I'm pretty sure SEN did their football coverage. Obviously, people couldn't be in Queensland commentators, so they were somehow looping the Zoom into the radio coverage, and they were calling it from like offices or offices at home or offices at Croc Media in Melbourne. So one good thing from COVID has been some of the technologies, and I reckon now they're going to be industry standard now and everyone's going to be using them, aren't they?
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. We're not going to go back to teams of people being sent to go and broadcast Brisbane Lions versus Gold Coast Suns. You might have a boundary rider that's actually there on site, and in Brisbane, maybe it's an Alistair Lynch or Luke Hodges, maybe, doing some stuff for Seven or whatever. And then you'll have people that are basically in the booth. Now, that started for me, and this is a fair way ago, but the 2014 Commonwealth Games, I commentated the cycling with Scott McGrory for Channel 10, and we did that from back here in Melbourne, right? And in the booth next to me was Pete Donegan and David Colbert, and they were doing the athletics. Now, it's not quite a perfect forensic science, because Pete Donegan and I had the same fear, not so much the road cycling events, because you need to cover that from one. You obviously can't run along for 200 Ks commentating what they're doing. But on the track cycling events, if an Aussie went down on a corner, and for Pete Donegan in the 400 metre events, if an Aussie hit a hurdle, the camera would stay with the rest of the field though. So you can only commentate what the camera is showing you. So the camera stays with the rest of the field. Whereas if you're at the event, you can say, oh, Ben's gone down, but it looks like Mark's out in front, and you can actually do it because you can see and you can look. But when the only point of your contact is what you can see on camera, you can't actually say he's broken his leg or he's hit the hurdle or whatever it is. In my case, Kelly had gone down, or Matthew Glaitzer or whatever had gone down. You had to wait until a director got back there. Now, touch wood, it didn't happen a lot, but that's why you'll hear commentary sometimes sounds a little bit disjointed, and especially for the football, because, and you guys know football, you can't, if you're not there, you can't put the binoculars up and look and see, well, Jack Revolt's going to launch for this one, because he's still waiting for the ball in the air that the director's following. So you do lose a percentage of not being there, but you also save a heap by no airfares, no per diems, no taxis to the airport, no hotel accommodation, all that sort of thing. So back in 2014, it was starting to happen. Now that COVID has hit, as I said, it's brought the year 2030 to us, and we're going to have most of the Big Bash, I reckon, was called in studios. The NBL basketball's called in studios. And it also means an efficiency too in terms of the other operators. So if you're an EVS operator, and an EVS operator is a small box that basically controls the replays. So they'll zoom it back real quick, get the replay ready to go. So now with NBL being out of a hub, one EVS operator who used to fly to Perth to go and do a Wildcats game and do the one game, he or she stays in the hub, and they do Townsville at 1 o'clock, and then they'll do Perth at 4 o'clock. And it's still a day, but they've done 2 games instead of 1. So quite often the efficiencies are going to be there for the networks to say, well, you know what? And we saw it, Channel 7 had Bruce McAvaney in Adelaide, and he was doing some hosting. They had the guys calling from the studio. They had a boundary rider or whatever. So you can have people everywhere. And as you said, Harsha Bogle came into the Fox cricket coverage from India, and he was commentating clear as day, watching the same vision. Now, clearly he couldn't see when the ball went right up because he was watching, but the technology has now made it adequate or better than adequate. And so I think the networks will say cost savings versus the extra percentage of being there, we'll take cost savings. So it's not going to change.
Hey, Ian, you've had a long time in sports media, and I obviously knew you at Channel 10, but even prior to that, like even going back to where it all started, and this is a bit about you, that you actually you finished your Bachelor of Arts in 1989, but also did a diploma in commercial radio at Swinburne University. Now, there's this sort of 2-part question. What got you into sports journalism and obviously media in the first place? But also, too, we talked about what happened with the Coza strategy, Cozalive media strategy, maybe to get off the front page. But a few years ago, and you're an experienced operator, you found yourself at the bit of a centre of attention with the Eugenie Bouchard whirl comment at the Australian Open. How did you batten that down? And because you'd been in the industry for such a long time, how did you handle that? And obviously going back to where it all started.
Yeah, well, that was a really interesting one. And that actually was something where Serena Williams made one comment one night about fashion and what she was wearing and everything else like that while I was interviewing her. And Eugenie actually tweeted saying, hey, Serena, awesome to see what you're wearing and hear you talk about fashion and everything else. And Eugenie was then on my court the following night. And so once we'd spoken about tennis, because the interviews go for 5 or 6 minutes, they don't go for 18 seconds, which is obviously what got clipped out. So Serena had already done her thing. She loved it. It's, awesome. Eugenie tweeted about it. I was showing the tweet. And it was like, oh, okay, yep, cool. So I talked to Eugenie about tennis. Well done. Congratulations through the next round, blah, blah, blah. Hey, listen, you had plenty to say about Serena's outfit. What are your thoughts? Blah, blah. Tell us about yours. And then she's like, this whole thing. And then the immortal line came out. So there was absolutely no offence meant and no offence taken by Eugenie at the time. She didn't care. She was happy to show off. And by the way, Nike sold 4 billion of those dresses after the worldwide coverage. And so no one thought of anything. It became the last question in the media conference. Hey, what'd you think of that? She said, yeah, didn't really care, but, got blown up. I was hosting a breakfast the next morning, Tennis Australia, my phone's going off. And in the media, guys, you have a lot of people you know, and then you've got a group of about 3 or 4 people who you trust, right? Big difference. So one of those guys who I trust was trying to get through to me. He says, you been on social media this morning? I said, no, I've been hosting this breakfast since 6 o'clock. He said, you might want to have a look. Anyway, had a look, Today Show, Sunrise. I went, So I rang the media at Tennis Australia and the executive, and Craig Tyler and a few others, who were all really supportive. And they had, in that period of time, gone back through all the subsequent interviews. They knew me as a person. They'd gone back through the interviews and they said, look, it's obviously been blown up. We're not even offering a comment about it. Play on, we don't see an issue. And I said, great, I'm happy to adhere to that, no problem at all. I said, but look, if I've seriously offended a 21-year-old girl, then I will go and apologise to her. So I made contact with Eugenie's camp and they're like, no, we don't care, we're preparing for the next game. Yeah, it's kind of funny and Nike are happy they're selling dresses, but I said, look, I'm happy to come apologise. Anyway, they said, no problem at all. So that's why I didn't then offer interviews around it, because what would have happened would have been that the Eugenie match would have been on, it was a Wednesday night, and so it came out Thursday. So had I commented, that would have been Thursday night's media. She would have then been playing on the Friday, so it would have kept going into the Saturday and everything else like that. So sometimes you're better off just going, you know what, I actually didn't do anything wrong. I'm not really worried about it. I got a job to do here. So I just went and did the job. But I had plenty of my friends in the media all coming and saying, oh, can I get an exclusive? You can write your own column. You can do whatever you want. Just tell us what happened. And so in the end, sometimes you're better off actually taking your own media advice, which was, well, what would you do if I was dealing with a client? And I'd say to the client, have you actually inherently done anything wrong? Now, look, the bottom line is that I continue to work for Tennis Australia. I've got a great relationship with Craig Tiley. I've seen Eugenie Bouchard around plenty of times. And you know what? First up on my court the next day was Venus Williams. And I thought, if there's any conjecture in the locker room about this guy who's asked this question, she will just destroy me. She couldn't have been funnier. She's hugging me. She's talking about being an old dinosaur. She's having a great time with the crowd. And I thought, you know what? All of those people that took umbrage on behalf of someone who actually didn't even take umbrage anyway, I don't even need to worry about it. So there you go. That's the story. You guys have got it.
I think also, though, Coza, it's sort of a byproduct of social media, like we were discussing before, and that's something that you've got to be very careful with. I know, having worked a little bit in and being intrinsically involved now within horse racing, it's something that's, I put a photo out, for example, when I was at the sales. They're like, oh, you don't own with Kieran Maher. What are you doing in their marquee, for example? And people assume on social media, and they make comments. I know for a fact there'd be a fair few reporters and stuff that would be trolled. And that's just the really unfortunate thing with social media. It's a good information and news source, but it's also a very negative source of things sometimes as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. And in the end, I actually stopped my wife reading it. My kids, thankfully, were young enough at that stage that didn't really worry. My daughter and her friends actually put together a do the twirl, hashtag or whatever. So I had a lot of support, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I read. And because I hadn't, the only person I was worried about was Eugenie Bouchard, right? If I'd offended her, then I would have obviously done something about it. So once I knew that, I was like, and so I would read through, and there was some I'd look at and I'd think, wow, I bet you wouldn't have the guts to say that to my face, right? Yeah. But social media does that. It allows people to hide behind it. And when I'm doing media training, I say to people that if you're happy for your grandmother to read it or for it to be on the front page of the paper, then sure, post it on social media. But if it fails any of those rules, if in doubt, leave it out. And there's a lot of people that get on social media that take umbrage on behalf of someone else who doesn't even care. And it's not just the issue I was involved in, but just in general. Yeah. That you sort of think, wow, you wouldn't have the guts to say it to someone's face. And secondly, if you actually stopped and thought about it for a moment, you probably wouldn't post it either.
Hey, Ian, we're just about to wrap up, but I was going to say Ben Carbonaro, because I've known Ian Cohen for a while, one of the first memories, and I was very lucky enough when I was a bit younger that I had the opportunity to work at Channel 10 and working at Sports Tonight in Melbourne. And one of the great things that I remember about Ian Cohen was that there was always this bloke that was behind me at a few tables, and he'd have a leather jacket on and he'd have the motorbike helmet out. And He was just wanted to get on his Kawasaki or his motorbike and drive like Casey Stoner down
doing
Yarrow or whatever. And I just thought it was interesting. I just thought it's one of those images that I remember, apart from getting Subway on the way to Channel 10 and doing the shot listing at Channel 10 for the footy games. But yeah, that was one of the memories that I had, was Ian Cohen getting on the motorbike and putting his helmet on as leaving the Como precinct. And what else I was going to say is that Ian's also done some surf lifesaving recently as well, volunteering. So outside of media, what else have you done during the period of lockdown, Ian, and also those Channel 10 days? They bring back.
Yeah, look, still got my motorcycle license, but the bike you're talking about is long gone. So, but yeah, still got the helmet and the leathers and really love it. And yes, you're quite right. Got my bronze again, surf lifesaving. So I went through the whole lot of 15-year-olds that thought I was from another planet, but managed to survive the run, swim, run. Did that at the Fairhaven Surf Club, where my daughter's actually chief instructor. So that was really good because I had an unusual January. I had no events, in terms of the tennis was February, the cycling events were cancelled, Pier to Pub was virtual. So I had an unusual January where for the first time in my life, I put on an out of office email, and I've never actually done that. So, I loved my Channel 10 days, and I remember you working there as well and beavering away. And, it was a really good grounding for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that got really good Channel 10 stories, and I enjoyed the 12, 13 years I had there after being at 3AW. And obviously I did country radio and TV as well on the way through. So a lot of people don't get that opportunity now, but no, look, I loved it, but really enjoy being master of my own destiny now. And while it's got its challenges, especially during COVID, no doubt about that, it's really good having the diversity and variety that I do now. I still get my taste of network TV every now and again, which is good fun.
Good stuff, Ian. And thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And you've been very helpful in getting a few people on this podcast. We had Sam Shepherd on, a 7-time Pier to Pub winner down at Lorne. And obviously we have a bit of a connection with Sam himself and his success. So thanks for following the interest of this podcast. And it's great to have you on. So we look forward to some of the things that you're going to do this year. It's probably going to be a different perspective from a football point of view. So we look forward to some of the things that you're going to be involved with. And hopefully as we ease our way out of COVID, that some of these events like the cycling will get back up and going, and you'll have plenty of staff that you can look at, and maybe Ben Carbonaro and I might be in that boat as well. So thanks for joining us on the Stoned Heen View podcast. Much appreciated.
No problem, boys. Great job you're doing, and it's always enjoyable viewing. So hopefully you continue to go from strength to strength. It's been a pleasure, mate. Good.
And Ben Carbonaro, thanks for joining us for this special podcast, and thanks for coming back on post summer series.
No worries, Mark. Always a pleasure.
Well, you can get in touch with the Stoned Heen View. We are on our Apple podcast channel. You can write us a review. We're also on Spotify and our launching platform, which is Podbean. We've also got a YouTube channel, and our Twitter account is at Stoned Heen View. So you can check us out on all our socials, and we'll be putting this podcast up with our audio and also vision via those platforms. So thank you to Ian Cohen for episode 47 being our special guest. It is bye for now for the Stoned Heen View, and we'll see you next time for episode 48 for the Stoned Heen View podcast. Thank you.